Can we just identify now a densely Kabbalistic exposition of hang on, just meet you all again. Okay. Of the source above in the divine, the source above of the timidius, the eternal components that we see even within finite nature. Not obvious, but nonetheless, upon reflection, we can see that even within nature itself, notwithstanding its external limits and constant change and the cycle of life and death, but nonetheless, probing deeper, we see the eternal properties, not to mention, of course, the obvious that the very makeup of everything, the atoms and subatomic particles, don't die. They are eternal. So that's another example how contemporary science has helped us understand this. But he brought other classic examples previously, or illustrations rather, of the eternity of nature. So to understand where this is rooted in the divine, because the nature, the external manifested nature of things is sourced in the finite descriptive systematic dimension of the divine. The malak halalmin. But you recall from yesterday, again, this is highly technical. So you recall from yesterday that where's the source of the bligvul? I'll use those Hebrew terms now. The bligvul, the infinite in gvul. Anybody? It's because the kav, the source of teva is the kav, and the source of the kav is the Ein Sof, that lifnei hatzimtzum. It's that it pierces the tzimtzum. Now the fact that it can pierce the tzimtzum, here's the chidush. In other words, it's not just a technical description. This is technical and physical. We don't mean it technically or physically, but we have no other language. And that is that there is outside the tzimtzum, quote unquote, seviv kalalmen, but then there's, as you identified yesterday, the tiferes hanelim, an atzmizdika level. That's the key here. An atzmizdika level, an essential level of the divine, which is higher than the Ein Sof. It's not unlike the three broad categories I learned in the previous Maamar, Eidos Chukim Mishpatim, Atzmo, Seviv, and Mamale. It's generally the same idea. So he's saying that it's not the same idea, but it has parallels. It's not the same levels, but it has parallels. Because everything is, as we've encountered over and over again in the Maimorim, everything is relative. So he's saying that Tiferes Hanelim, that's the level that he described. The Tiferes Hanelim means the concealed Tiferes. What that means is that even in the Oir Lifnei Hatzimtzum, the Ein Sof Mamish, the level of the Ein Sof where Leinoga Hatzimtzum, the Tzimtzum didn't even affect. So we're talking within the infinite, a pure infinite. Higher than Seviv, like the Ein Sof itself in its pure form, because Seviv Kalalman is still Seviv Kalalman, as we learned, still some limitation there. But in the pure Ein Sof, so Kabbalah and Chassidus speaks of the spheres there existing in a way themselves of Nelem or Gnuzis or concealed. What that means is that finitude is there in more of a potential state than an actualized state. And that too is relative. Tiferes Hanelim means Tiferes, B'chlal, since Tiferes is a level, that is a fusion or of opposites, Chesed and Gevurah. So we need to appreciate is that Tiferes is rooted in an atzmizdika expression. It's an atzmizdika expression, an essential expression, by virtue of the fact that it, even at its sublime potential level, expresses a duality of Chesed and Gevurah, or a harmonious duality, which is what Tiferes is. So classic Tiferes is classic Tiferes, harmony within the system. But Tiferes Hanelim, the Esesveres Aknuzes, the concealed level of the spheres. So there, Tiferes is Tveres Hanelem expresses an atmisdika property within the oir. Okay, we've learned in other Maimonium examples for this. For what? For something which is present in a latent and potential form, not actualized, but certainly present. And the classic example is fire in a rock. The fact that the rock can produce fire means it has this kinetic energy. It means it has this, there is fire in a very latent way. By striking it, we simply actualize through the friction and so on, we actualize its ability to produce fire. But even before that, the stone has it, but completely undifferentiated and non-articulated. At any rate, so what we need to know is that this is an answer to how is it that within nature itself, which is overtly gvul and finite, we identify these eternal properties. That's because this conclusion, the source of nature is the kav, not the kalim, but the kav, and the kav itself is rooted in the Eidin Tzaf Lifnei Tzimtzum, and not stam pre-tzimtzum, but in order to pierce the tzimtzum, not stam oir, but teferes hanelim, atmisdika oir. Is that kind of clear, at least for the geographic technical identity, which is what we need to grasp? Yes? Little nod.
Now I could hear you.
Huh?
I couldn't hear you for a while. I don't know if it's on your end or my end.
Did everybody hear? Others hear? So I don't know, which part didn't you hear?
Just for the last 30 seconds or so.
I just didn't add anything. I just maybe said it in a slightly different way. I didn't add anything.
Okay.
All right? Okay, so continuing from there, Valpiza, now 3 lines from the bottom of page Kuf Samache, which means halfway through the second paragraph of chapter 4. Valpiza Levaya, I just want you to know, it gets highly technical for the next 2 paragraphs in identifying and matching up what is rooted where. Because we're dealing here with nature, and we're dealing here with 2 levels of miracle. A miracle, the discussion in general is of 3 states. The natural state, a miracle that's invested within nature, but nature is a thin veil on the miracle, like the Chanukah Purim story. And then there's the Ois and the Fleis Gedolos Levadoi, when God it brings about a change within nature, but it's within nature. It's within nature, but it still happens completely naturally. So he's going to identify the levels, the divine levels, that are all responsible or invested for this phenomena and where they are rooted. Now, having just said what we did now we're talking about nature and the infinite or the eternal properties in nature, and we identified where that comes from. Now he's going to say, so now we're going to point out that there is a maila in nature itself, in the eternal property of nature. Like there's a maila, a virtue, over the revelation of the Ein Sof that happens through miracles. It's higher and deeper. What is? Never mind miracles, but even Teva Gufa. But now we're identifying the Tmidius in Teva. The Tmidius in Teva comes from a higher shoulders than a Nes. Why? Who? Ki Oish Lifnei Tzimtzum, Hu Mugbul Binyan Abligvul. The classic Oir that precedes the Tzimtzum, and that's where the classic miracle comes. So it's limited to being infinite. Can't fuse with nature. And when revealed, it's going to dismiss nature. It's limited to being infinite. Now, it doesn't have this essential property to be able to be both infinite and fused with finite, which is the characteristic of essence. It doesn't have that. It's classic infinite, classic Oir. That's what a classic miracle is, which is why the classic miracle shatters nature and dismisses nature. and puts it aside, as it were, replacing it with a higher reality temporarily. So that is, he's saying, is bligvul, but it's the inherent limitation that's limited to bligvul. And Oida Seviv cannot be revealed in a revealed way in creation. And therefore, so when we have a classic miracle, that is the light, the oid, as it were, metaphorically speaking, that precedes the tzimtzum, from where miracles come. So who are they? Shidu dateva. So when a miracle happens, it's at the expense of shattering the laws of nature. Bitla teva gvul da'olam, dissolving the nature of finitude of the world. Whereas, so now we're going to see that there's a mila in ordinary nature, but in the tmidius of it, which he said before is not obvious, but nonetheless present. We need the atomic microscope, but we need to observe nature in a very discerning way to see its eternal properties. So however, the Oid HaKav, which we just said now, that's the source of the constancy of, or the infinite property, which is in Tav itself. This comes from Haydn Oid HaSeivit. Haydn, the Oid that just hovers, as it were, outside the realm of the tzimtzum, like we explained in the previous Maimon. But rather, Tiferes Hanelam, we're probing deeper into more atzmizdika levels. Tiferes Hanelam, as we identified earlier. So, since Tiferes, and it's an atzmizdika property, an essential expression, and therefore the hallmarks of it is the fusion of opposites. That's why it's Tiferes. That's what Tiferes means, harmony of opposites. So, here we have a level that's able to bear and manifest opposites, infinite and finite, and therefore it's both nature and supernatural simultaneously. So therefore the Eirakav, because it's Haydn Soivin, it's rooted in Tiferes Hanelam, so its revelation is where we discern it, this infinite property in nature itself. So now we just looked about a mila of teva over nisim. Never mind, as we said earlier, the mila of those nisim that come in teva over those nisim that don't come in teva. That was discussed earlier. Now we're pointing out a much more subtle and deeper truth, that there's a mila in classic nature itself, nothing miraculous. There's no change. It's the way the Eibush created the world in the beginning. The laws of nature are respected. There's no radical turnabout, inexplicable radical turnabout that happens within the natural order. We're not talking of that. We're talking here of Pasha Teva Kipshuta. But he's saying that in Teva Kipshuta, this infinite property, and that's higher than the Ness. Because the Ness is, if you can fill in the blank for me, we'll be gratified. What's he saying now? That a classic Ness, the root of it is what level? Classic Ness. Seviv. And the root of the Timidius of Teva is 2 words, he calls it.
Tiferes Hanelam.
Tiferes Hanelam. Correct. All right. Clear? Now, it gets more subtle. And now you say, chapter 5.
Can I just ask a question? It's sounding like as if it's like there's a part of the same way that he was explaining the highest level of like a part of us. In order for us to be a witness, we have a part of him on this inside, and that's how we're able to get to the highest level of Adis. So it's almost as if he's describing it in the same way that an adamant object has whatever natural order also has, in essence, a piece of him inside that's able to connect directly without.
So I said before there's a parallel, but it's not the same, but there is a parallel. Yeah. But it's not the same, because everything is relative. I'm not going to address that because that would be a huge digression, but it's not the same, but there's a parallel. All right? So that's correct. They say, al pi anal. Now, in light of the above that we just learned now, that even the tmidiyus, the constancy, the infinite properties in nature, we just said it's because that's rooted in the Tveras Hanelam, or as he calls it now simply, the Eidin Tzaf HaBligvul, the true Eidin Tzaf, which is higher than Oilamus, higher than Soiviv, even. And point A, now point B. And V'amayla shebenissim hi. And we said the mile of nisim is, what do you say? The virtue of miracles is, shall yodom nimshach hagil diran tzaf habligvul atzmoi shalamaylim mislapshus begvul. The virtue now of the miracle is that the miracle, the Eidin Tzaf, is stripped away, not contained by gvul. It's the pure expression of Eidin Tzaf habligvul, right? The pure expression of it. Yesh loima. So now, having said that, so now that I suggest the chiddush, the shnei asogim shebenisim, now bringing into the picture the two categories of nisim, namely nisim shalamani mateva and nisim shalavoshim mateva. There's two kinds of miracles. Miracles are completely dismissed nature, miracles that come within the veil of nature, but it can be seen that nature is merely a veil on the miracle. Hey, they are shnei fanim begilei tzaf habligvul shalamayim mislapshus begvul. They are two ways that they didn't tzaf habligvul. Oh, I'm sorry. So they are two ways. They are two ways where the Eidin Tzaf, the bligvul, the true bligvul, is expressed. Right? What did you say now? Again, Valpizem, just go through on this. Where were Yesh Loima. The Shnei Asukim Shebenisim, go back. The two categories of Nisim, Nisim Shalman Matev, Nisim Lamavashim Mateva. So Nisim again that are high in nature, and Nisim that are clothed in the veil of nature. That too is two ways of the Eidin Tzaf that is revealed, which is what they share in common is both are higher than Gvul, but one of them we said does come in the second way in the veil of Gvul. So there's two Eifanim, which is elaborated in a moment, of the Gili of the Eidin Tzaf. And therefore, in other words, for it to come into Gvul is within deeper in the Eidin Tzaf HaBligvul, in the miracle, if it comes in the veil of nature. And therefore, Zesh is that which we said before in Tziv Gimel. What's the mile of Nisim in Teva? The Shagilo Eidin Tzaf HaBligvul mislabish bagvul, the mile of the second way of miracle. That's the where a malanes makir benisa at all, not like Chanukah and Purim, right? So the mile of that is because we said that is greater than a miracle that comes veiled in nature. There's a virtue to the miracle that comes completely invested in nature. Why? Because it's mislabish bagvul de'elam atzmai. It's so unlimited that it can be invested within nature itself. So that which we're getting the flow now. That we said before that this mile that comes from lubish in nature. The mile is that in nisim itself, there's also the mile of its being infused in nature. And the mile of miracles are invested in. So that brings out. When a nes is mislabish in teva, it brings out that in nisim there's also the mile of teva. You see, it can be mislabish in teva. That brings out how teva exists within the nes. And as for the mile of the Nes itself, not the Teva property, but the Nes property, which is the Ein Sof property, what do we see when it's a miracle invested in nature? That points to the greatness of Ein Sof itself. That the bligvul itself, which is beyond nature, and we would think normally when revealed, it would dismiss nature, but no, it manipulates and therefore is invested in nature in such a way that nature becomes according to its will. So in all of these words, he's saying that a nest that's enclosed in Teva brings out two properties. The Teva that's in the nest and brings out the purity, the true infinite nature of the bligvul, that it's not limited to being hide in gvul, but invested in gvul. It's a subtle point. I hope that was conveyed. I'll say it again. That which we said in Siv Gimel, that the second order of miracle, not the miracle that completely dismisses nature, but the miracle that is melslabish in nature. So there's two milas here. The mila is that we see the property of Teva, because we've identified that in Teva Gufa, there's a bligvul property in Teva that exists within nature. And then it brings out the mila of the infinite, the true infinite nature of this order of miracle, in what? That it doesn't have to dismiss nature, but it's mislabish in nature. All right, let's go further. Yes? So that was talking about nisim that are what? Invested in nature. Now, both of them, we spoke about now, those that are mislabish and gvul in the two efanim. But now going back to, he goes back and forth to the nisim that are hide in Teva altogether and bringing out their mila also. Shagam amal nisim elo. What's the mila of these nisim? Shanisim hu begiloi. There, it's obvious. The miraculous is obvious. V'gaman also. In one way, when you have the pure classic miracle, there you see the Eibishter's control over nature in one way higher. When nature is completely dismissed, we see God's control over nature in one way, in the simple fact that it's totally beyond the natural order. This is the mile of the classic mile of the Nes, because nisim that invested in Teva, Shateva Nisha b'Mitzias, nature remains. Hashlita itself ala Teva. So those miracles that are invested in nature, so the control, the mastery of the Eid itself on Teva Iraq is in what sense? Teva isn't completely dismissed, but its conduct is now according to the will as manifested in the miracle. However, Banisim Shalamayle Mateva, so this is the upshot of the pure miracle is Shateva Mizbatul Mitziyusai. It's not that we're just redirecting nature, but nature's completely dissolved. So here, Ashlita, this is the upshot of the pure miracle. Till now we're speaking the upshot of the miracle Dafke in Teva, which we'll come back to. But now we're speaking about the Maila of the pure miracle. Here, the mastery of the Ein Sof is not just in the direction or the conduct of Teva, but its very, very nature, completely dismissed, suspended. When nature is suspended completely, so this is a Maila of the supremacy or the what's the word I use? The shlita, the mastery, the mastery of control of the Ein Sof over nature, to the point that nature is completely, its very existence is this battle. That's the Maila. There's a downside to that as well, but there's the Maila of the classic miracle. Concluding the point, the Rebbe suggests and the difference between these two levels of nest. The nest that dismisses nature, and the nest that controls nature, is as follows. Now, this is going to connect us to what we started the shir with. The Nisim invested in nature. That is a level of what? Of oir, which allows for gvul. And therefore, when this miracle happens, gvul doesn't become dismissed, because to begin with, gvul has a place. That's oir hasover. But the gvul is now conducting itself by the will of God as manifested in the oir gvul. Whereas about nisim shulamayim eteva, but nisim were completely nature is completely overridden. So gila oir gvul k'meshulamayim inagvul. That's a level of pure bligvul that's higher than gvul, higher than sover. And therefore, relative to that, teva is completely nullified. But then, this is still not Tiferes Hanelam, because Tiferes Hanelam, having an atmistic property, can be invested in nature. Now we're talking only in the miracle dimension. So the miracle that comes in teva and the miracle beyond teva, he just simply said the miracle in teva is like a bligvul, but shaykh gvul, and the miracle which is higher than teva is bligvul itself. Al derech mevu b'makemach in square brackets. It is going to, just to be aware that the next paragraph is going to bring out the mile of dafke in teva. That's going to come el afal piken, which is a mile still, a greater mile. But let's believe that. Like we learned elsewhere with respect to the parallel in the person of Ratzon of will and intellect. As is noted in the square brackets, the Ratzon v'seichel him moshel al ir hasover. The Ratzon is a moshel for the ir hasover, which is nisim, as we just described now. I'm not talking Tiferes Hanelam, we're talking ir hasover. And sheresh hanis and b'eder mamaleh is sheresh hateva, right? So a person with himself, the parallel is will and intellect. Intellect is his natural construct, his rational and conscious makeup. But a person also has willpower, and willpower is a much deeper force within the soul, which is analogous to Sevev Kol Almin. And willpower, as we know, can manipulate the conscious faculties of the person, that they behave in ways beyond their natural capacities. We've learned at length, the person born with limited intellectual capacity, but if he engages his will and really wants, which most people sadly do not, but if a person really engages his with the power of will, he can expand his intellect beyond its naturally born capacity. The same is true the opposite. If you don't want to learn, you can close your mind and you won't understand. As we see, consider the shir doesn't want to learn, doesn't get it, because doesn't want to, for whatever reason. So that's the Ratzon is a parallel to a manifestation of Sevev. Sevev Kol Almin, it's not detached completely. Will is not detached from the other faculties of the soul. It's connected, it's transcendent, but connected. It is the perfect incarnate of Sevev Kol Almin. So now, having said that, continuing this in the brackets, you see, points out now a very fascinating thing. So when you have will, and will, you want something. And because you want something, so therefore the intellect is going to kick in and justify it rationally why you want it. So this, that the will wants something, and it affects the intellect, the rational. That the will should what? The intellect should provide rational justification for the will. What's happening there is that it's not that the pure will itself is being contained by the intellect. The pure will is super rational. I want because I want. I just want to justify it intellectually. So to what degree does the seichel play, or to what degree is the rotzen invested in the seichel? Only ha'ora. the external dimension of the will, as if to say that will says like this: I want because I want. It transcends reason. But I also want you to package this. The will says to the mind, whatever reason for others to justify to others or whatever it is, I want this to be packaged in rationale. I want an explanation for it as well. But that's it. Also give me an explanation for what I want. But the pure rotzen itself is l'mayla min haseichel. Aval etzem harotzen hu einem nimsheh b'seichel. But the etzem of the rotzen is not drawn in seichel. Ein tam l'rotzen, pure will is not rooted in rationale at all. It's not a logical thing. It's just, that's what I want. It's just intrinsic to my makeup, not because it's by seichel we mean because of some external consideration or gain, some rational consideration about the virtue of it that I will therefore acquire it. No, Ratzon is rooted in the self. It's not rooted in out there. It's because of me, therefore I want. Not because of that thing, therefore I want it. Not because of the mila of that thing, the intellectual mila. It doesn't start with the mila, the virtue of the other, of the whatever it is that the person desires, but it starts with the self. So what's he saying over here? That here, what are we talking here about? The nisim that are higher than teva, which is what? But they do become enclosed in teva. So the parallel for that is the rotzen that becomes justified in the ha'oras ha'rotzen by seichel. So that's sevev kol almin. In Lamaila means sevev kol almin's impact in the world. It's analogous to the rotzen being justified by seichel. But let's continue. But this is all talking about what? This is all talking about nisim, which are melubash somewhat in teva. I'm sorry, but we just described now is nisim, which is higher than teva, this last point. This is a ness which is higher than teva. One second. So where's the seichel shebedova there? Why is he bringing us the parallel of rotzen and seichel?
Because it's still melubash in teva.
No, he's saying not. It's not. We're saying no. It's about the nisr shalmani teva, which is not mislabish in teva. The next paragraph will be nisr mislabish in teva. Let me just go back. Let's get the flow of this. Yes. Because
it's like soiviv al almin.
Because when he concluded in the square brackets the rotzen and seichel, even though the last thing he was speaking about was nisim l'mayli mateva, he's clearly going back to nisim belubish and teva, and which is a little bit strange. Why he would bring the rotzen and seichel right after identifying nisim l'mayli mateva? Because just an overall emotion, rotzen and seichel, and therefore there is a time where there's a rotzen. It's revealed that it's not justified by seichel. That is in the shlamali mateva, and the nisim where it's justified to some degree in seichel, which is the chitzenius rotzen. That is a nest that is melubash in teva. That's how we have to learn pshat here. But now we're going to talk about nisim which are actually melubash in teva, the mile of that over the nisim which are higher. Let's finish this section. The chsoronit is not the pure rotzen. That's true. But the mile is where that the Eid itself doesn't have to dismiss teva, but confuse and express its mastery on teva itself. The Yashloim are tying it all together, tying everything together. So the difference between these two kinds of nisim, the nisim which are completely beyond teva, or the nisim that are enclosed some degree in teva, this is similar to the bittul of Yichudi Ilah and the bittul of Kabbalah's oil. What's the difference? Yichudi Ilah, the bittul is, what's Yichudi Ilah? Yichudi Ilah is the higher unity. That's the difference between Yochid and Echad. The higher unity means that Welt becomes bottle because we experience the truth from the Eibishter's perspective that everything is bottled b'metzias, that everything is merely the consequence of his will. It's a unity that's inspired, a bittul rather, that's inspired by the revelation of the truth. He's in the Shamas Datzilis, who walk around the Elam Hazeh with the experience of the truth of Hashem Echad, and therefore they bottle and they look at all of creation, they see it totally nullified because quite simply they have Hashem's perspective on creation, and that is, as I just defined it, the consequence of his will having no independence. So there is a creation, but the bottle b'metzias. Kabbalah Seil means he doesn't have that experience. Doesn't have the experience of the bittul of Atzilis at all. He is a neshama that's labish in a guf, and what his experience is Elam Hazeh, etc. But nonetheless, Kabbalah Seil, the Eibishter says, so Lepel Mamash, he conducts himself according to the Ratzon Hashem, but not out of experience, but out of surrender. That's the difference: experience or surrender, the gilui or the bittul to it. So the difference between the nest that happens where where nature is a transparent lavush to the miracle, or a nest that happens that's not discernible at all in what happened, is a difference between Yichudi Lo and bittul. As he goes on to explain, so when we have this is not the two-way fan of miracle in Teva. This is contrasting Nisim Haid in Teva period or Nisim in Teva. There's the two broader categories, Yichud Yilo and Bittul. So this the Lagaba Gilo Eretz Sof Ablik Balatev is battle mitziyusay. So when the Eretz Sof is revealed, then Teva's this battle in brackets Nisim Shulamayim Ateva. So that is all that Bittul Yichud Yilo. That's like Yichud Yilo Bittul b'Mitziyus. Habo, which comes at the Isbonon, is the Kolokem Mekelo Chashivi. Chashiv, that everything before him is absolutely insignificant on its own, and all it is a consequence of his will, and therefore has no reality at all. And that is a nest that blows away Teva, that's Yichud Yilo. But when V'zesha Teva Nishab Mitziyusa, the fact is Teva remains. This is a mirror, this is the Nisim happened in Teva. Who its conduct is like if nature would have said disease or death. But nature is now saying life. It's a nest because there's a change here, but it's a little bit in Teva because nature itself is saying it. So this is the Kabbalah of the Kabbalah soil. Right? The two kinds of Eved. There's the Eved that loves his master, and therefore there's no resistance at all. That's Bittul b'Mitzias. And therefore what the master wants, he naturally wants and naturally feels. There's no struggle. But then there is, so that's the kind of ness where nature is simply dismissed. But then you have the second oifen, which has a mile, as he's going to explain. The mile of Yichud Tata over Yichud Ilah, the mile of Kabbalah soil over Yichud Ilah, the mile of Bitla Yesh of Bitl Mitzias. So here where the Nisam Mulubish in Teva, that's like the Bitl of Kabbalah soil, the Agamshen Nisham Mitziyusa. He still remains. It's like the Eved that does not like the Ben. The Ben, the son, is Yichud Ilah, or the servant that loves his master. But he is an Eved Bafked Nichla. He'd rather be doing what he wants to do. His makeup didn't change, but he surrendered his Kabbalah's oil to the master. What's he doing? He's doing what the master wills. So that's the Maila, as he goes on to explain. Now he's not explaining the Maila yet. He's just pointing out the difference that a miracle that happens within the construct of nature is al derech yichud tato or kabbalas oil, when nature be'etzem still remains nature, left unto its own device, this wouldn't be happening. But because there is a kabbalas oil surrender to the Ratzon Hashem, so then then nature does what nature does. So that's a maila of the nisim b'lubashin teva over the overtness, which is yichud ilah. And now he's going to bring out in the next paragraph the maila of yichud tato over yichud ilah.